Okay, so we established last time that it's a scientific consensus that it's basically inarguable that the zygote from the moment of conception is human and is alive. So, why do people think they can kill it? Well, for a variety of reasons. The main thesis is this, that the zygote, the fetus, depending on where they draw the line, is alive and human, but less valuable, doesn't hold the same value that a post-birth human does or an adult human does for a variety of reasons. They'll give, depending on who you talk to, they'll draw their own line and give their own reasons. But here's the reasons that are brought up. First, they'll say that the zygote or the fetus is not sentient, that it is sentience that gives one value, that it is basically consciousness, the ability to sense things, the ability to feel things, the ability to be aware of things, that consciousness or sentience is what makes one human. Now, the problem with all these lines that we're going to see, that we're going to draw, is all basically the same, that it's lines that you can draw about post-birth humans as well, ones that you don't think that I can kill. For instance, right now in the hospital, just a few miles away from me, there are several people who are in a coma and who are lacking sentience and have for a while. And in fact, in the case of the comas, we're not even sure they will wake up. We hope they will. We don't know that they will. But hypothetically, let's say that someone's in a coma in the hospital, and we know for a fact that in 9 months they're going to wake up from the coma. 9 months, just pick an arbitrary number. 9 months they're going to wake up from that coma. Can I then walk into that hospital room and stab them in the head? Which is the way that during birth abortions, partial birth abortions are most often done. Can I do that? They're not sentient. They're not conscious. So by that definition, they're not fully human and doesn't lack the value enough to be saved. And so I can then walk in and kill them. Of course not. That's absurd, because sentience or consciousness doesn't make one human. Doesn't make one fully human or fully valuable, right? You lack sentience and consciousness when you fall into a deep sleep, if it's deep enough. Can I kill you if you're in your deep sleep? You're not aware of it anyway. Or what if just take it to the brink here. What if you're in the hospital and you have a loved one who is being supported by life support, who's in the plugged in, and you're having the very difficult, traumatic conversation about whether or not to pull the plug? Can I go into that room and stab them? Can I go into that room and strangle them? Can I go into that room and kill them? But they may be dying in a minute anyway by your decision. Can I do that? Of course not. Why? Because it's not my prerogative to do so. It is me taking the life of another, regardless of consciousness, regardless of sentience. So if you're going to say sentience and consciousness is what makes one valuable, the problem is you have to say that that's the same thing true of adults, and therefore if you're not sentient, you're not valuable, at least not to the full extent, to the same extent that I would be if I'm sentient, and therefore you can kill them. Okay. Secondly, some may take a more nuanced approach and say, well, okay, but it's self-awareness, being aware of yourself, right? You get basically the same issues with those in the coma, but even more sharply, it's generally thought that babies, infants, aren't self-aware at least for a few months after birth. Aware of themselves as a unique individual that has never existed before, that will never exist again. That's the idea of self-aware. They're not self-aware for at least a few months after birth. There's not many people out there saying that you can kill a 3-month-old. So some will say, okay, well, it's the ability to reason. It's the ability to reason. Psychology used to think that children couldn't reason until they were several years old. I saw a study, the most recent study I saw said that children may be able to reason at about 1-year-old, though the evidence looked a bit specious to me. But regardless, a 6-month-old is not able to reason to what we mean by reasoning, to follow lines of thought, to use logic, to reason. But again, there aren't many people saying that you can kill 6-months-old. Or people will say it's the ability to feel pain. That was a popular one, and that we used to think that fetuses couldn't feel pain until well into the 3rd trimester. We know far better now. As early as 7 or 8 weeks, fetuses feel pain. We know that. By the way, moms normally don't find out they're pregnant until 5 or 6 weeks. As early as 7 or 8 weeks, fetuses can feel pain, and we know by 18 weeks they are just as capable as feeling pain as we are as adults. So in the 3rd trimester, when their limbs are ripped off and their heads are removed, they feel it. The most popular one is, at least caused by Roe v. Wade, is viability. Viability, which is a word that they almost made up, which they defined as the ability to survive outside of the womb. right? To not be dependent upon the mother, the ability to survive outside the womb. Now, Scalia points out the weakness of this idea in his in the most recent decision. But what does that mean, viability? I mean, what does that mean? What does that mean to you, viability? You get to decide what that means. Survive outside the womb. There's all kind of problems with that. It's not an objective line. It's an arbitrary one. For instance, viability where? Viability in America with if we have enough money to do whatever it takes to keep the child alive, or viability somewhere else where they don't have the access to such medical care or don't have the money to support them. Is value based on how financially well off the family is? Is that when you can draw value? Value changes based on how much money a family has to take care of a kid, or where they live. Value changes based on where they live and the access they have to medical materials that can keep a child alive. In 1973, viability was into the third trimester, 23, 24, 25 weeks. We've pushed it back at least a month by now. Probably even more than that. So viability changes daily, yearly at least. Viability changes based on where you live. Viability changes based on how much money you have. The point they could survive outside the womb has tons of variables. So taking that word or that idea and making that the definition of when one has value enough to not kill is very difficult, very malleable, not objective, and is different based on your financial status and your geography. Viability. And then further, what does that mean, viability? Right? It seems viability means ability to survive. A 6-month-old can't survive on its own. If a 6-month-old is left on its own in its crib without anyone doing anything for him, or on the floor, wherever, the 6-month-old will die because the 6-month-old is entirely dependent upon the mother, or entirely dependent upon somebody giving care to it, taking care of it, helping make sure it stays alive. But again, I can't go kill a 6-month-old. So what do we mean by viability? Do we mean the ability to breathe on its own, heartbeat on its own? You can draw the line wherever you'd like to, depending on whatever's convenient for you, which tends to be the way that our culture does things. It's a very weak line to draw, viability. We have no idea what it means. And beyond that, if we mean the inability to need other things to support life, then someone who's got a pacemaker, who needs that machinery, who's not viable on his own but needs a pacemaker to keep him alive, can I kill him? Can I kill the person with an iron lung? Right, in an iron lung? Can I kill people can I kill old people who are dependent upon hospice care? Again, can I kill infants after they're born and they're in the hospital being cared for by nurses in the NICU? Can I kill people who are dependent upon something else or someone else to keep them alive? Because that's a lot of us. At 8 weeks old, the baby is already able to frown and smile, move her head, and hiccup. At week 4, the kid is already 10,000 times larger than the fertilized egg. 10,000 times. That's one of those numbers that's so big that you just kind of think, wow, and don't even think about. That's insane, right? My oldest son, Atlantis, has grown a ton in the last couple of months, right? Has gone from being a couple inches shorter than my wife to about 3 inches taller than her in just a few months, right? So like 5 inches of growth in just a few months. That's insane, right? But that's like what, 4% of his size that he's grown, and that seems like a ton. 10,000 times bigger than it was when it was a fertilized egg. And that's at 4 weeks. Again, before the mother knows she's pregnant. Also at 4 weeks, brainwaves have been already detectable. So if it's brainwaves, then 4 weeks is the line for you. At 3 weeks, the heart is already beating its own blood. Not the blood of the mother, its own blood. Very often its own blood type, totally different than the blood of the mother that is outside of the baby. At what point can you kill it? So I want to end with an acronym that is used by some to show the categories in which a fetus is different than an adult. Okay, in what way is a fetus? In what way is a zygote? In what way is a in the womb human different than the out of the womb human? Right, and therefore less valuable. The acronym is the word SLED, S-L-E-D. The first one is it's different in size, right? It's so much smaller than us. The fetus, the zygote, is so much smaller than us. The question is, does increased size, make one more valuable? Cohen, my 3-year-old, is a lot smaller than me, right? I'm not a particularly big guy, 5'10"-ish, 170-ish, right? Average, I guess. But Cohen is way smaller than me. So is he less valuable than me? There are, surprisingly, some adults even that are smaller than me. My brother is much shorter than me, at least a few inches. So is he less valuable than me? Because he's smaller? Does size make value? Men are bigger than women on average. So are men more valuable than women? All right. The L is level of development. Level of development. Right? An embryo is much less developed than me. So it must be less valuable. Really? I mean, that's the idea, right? It's one of these four categories. Level of development. Again, Cohen, my 3-year-old, far less developed than me. Brain doesn't work as well, right? Can't run all that well. Can't reproduce, right? Is unable to do that. All these things, far less developed. So is he less valuable than me? Does development make value? Right? That's crazy. The E is environment, right? The environment. It's inside the womb, right? It's different than where we are. We are outside the womb. It is inside the womb. That much must make it less valuable. Really? I mean, does where you're located geographically change one's value, especially when the difference is about 7 inches, right? It's about 7 inches from inside the womb to outside the womb, and that 7 inches somehow magically conveys value that you knew, right? We don't apply that in any other realm of life, that geography or environment is what makes one valuable, right? Are you more valuable when you're at work than you're at home? Are you more valuable if you're in America than if you're in Mexico? Are prisoners of less value because of their confined place that they're in? Right? Does location grant value? The current position of many is that abortion up until the point of birth, right? Up until the point of birth, you can kill the baby. Right up until the moment that it is born. So that 7-inch change is what gives one value. That while it's here, geographically a few inches away, it's not valuable at all and you can kill it. But when it becomes here, a few inches away, it is of immense value. Absurdities. And then the D is degree of dependence. Degree of dependence, right? Totally dependent on the mother. This is back to what we were saying a minute ago. The same problems, right? Infants are totally dependent on the mother or on somebody to take care of it. Somebody's milk. Totally dependent on the mother. Old people, totally dependent on a caregiver. People with artificial hearts, totally dependent on that machinery. People plugged in, totally dependent on that machinery. 12-year-old paraplegic, an adult paraplegic, totally dependent on his parents, his or her parents, to take care of them, or whoever the caregiver is. There are tons of people who are totally dependent on someone else or something else, and that doesn't mean that they are less valuable. Doesn't mean that we can kill them. There's a story of a woman walking into her doctor's office with her 2-year-old son, and she's pregnant, and she doesn't want the baby for a variety of reasons. Can't afford it, already got a kid, thought she was done, etc. And she walks in with the 2-year-old, and she tells the doctor, "Doctor, I need an abortion. I can't have more than one kid." And so the doctor, trying to make a point, says, "I understand. Life's tough. Financial resources only enough for one child. That's fine. But abortions are fairly dangerous. Let's just kill this one," and points to the 2-year-old. Which, of course, illustrates the problem, right? Because really, killing the 2-year-old would be more healthy for the mother. It's doing the same thing. Right? You're getting rid of one of the 2 children. But that's disgusting to even think about, to even consider. So the fetus is a living human being. So aborting that living human being, which is just as valuable as a human being outside of the womb, right? Whose size or level of development or environment or degree of dependence doesn't change the value of the thing. Getting rid of it is no different than murdering a baby outside the womb. There is no heavier, graver issue in our time than this one. Let us stand firm. Love you, church. Talk to you soon.